Hello. How are you all doing? Welcome to the maiden episode of Fireside Tales. There's a live chat on the side of your screen, so you can feel free to write and say hi so I know who you are and so we can engage with each other. So since I'm not camping right now and I don't have a campfire, I still got a fire to be next to me as we're telling stories. So here's my little fire, my little candle for the Fireside Tales. I can see a couple of people on the chat. So as we wait for a few more people to come live, maybe you can introduce yourselves in the live chat. I'm so excited because this show is going to be a beautiful way to engage with other backpackers, people I've met, people I've not met, people who would like to get into backpacking. I think it's going to be a beautiful platform for us to share stories, to ask questions of each other. And I'm also planning to have guest speakers on the show as well. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Hi, Shayer. I can see you there in the chat. The people who've just come on, you're welcome to type into the chat and just say hi as I get started. So the show is very short. It's just 10-15 minutes of storytelling and then 10-15 minutes of Q&A, and that's it. So welcome. Let's get cozy. If you've got some tea or some wine, please go ahead and sip on it. Let's get cozy. And I'll get started with the stories. So I think some of you had watched my intro video where I told you about my first time ever backpacking, which was to Mexico. This was in 2013. So what did I know about backpacking at this point? Absolutely nothing. I was born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. And from this part of the world and in my particular Indian community, there is not much backpacking that goes on. And also from my observations, I've noticed that it's very much a male-dominated space and a male white-dominated space, actually. So it's quite interesting to be subverting those stereotypes by being a woman and specifically a woman of color. So that's also maybe an interesting topic for a future discussion. So I had heard about backpacking from my best friend, one of my best friends from undergrad, and from my boyfriend at the time. And I just knew it was this thing where people would go off for weeks or months with all their belongings on their back, and they'd be alone and just meet people and go to crazy places, and they would be on a budget. And it sounded crazy. So what did I do? I bought myself a backpack, which I have here to show you. The same backpack. Here it is. A good old red backpack. It's so dirty and worn out because it's been traveling with me for 7 years now. I do wash it sometimes, but then it gets dirty again. I promise I wash it. And then I bought myself a pair of hiking boots, which I left in the other room. I was planning to show them to you as well. I'll show them to you next week. And I bought myself a Spanish phrase book because I didn't know Spanish. And then in terms of planning, I'd heard of this concept called WWOOFing. WWOOFing stands for Worldwide Organization of Organic Farms, if I got that right, not woofing the dog. So what you do in a WWOOFing exchange is basically this is a value exchange. So there is no money involved. And you go to a farm, which you have applied to, and you basically volunteer your time and labor in return for accommodation, food, a beautiful community. And it's really a wonderful experience. These are often hippie and alternative communities. And I've spent quite a bit of time volunteering on several organic hippie farms and communes around the world. So I applied to a few in Mexico, and I got into one in Michoacan. It's called El Bosque, which means the forest, I think, in Spanish. And this is actually, Michoacan is actually the state that I mentioned in that intro video, which was on a level 4 travel advisory from the US. But I still went and I was fine. And part of the reason I thought it would be okay to go was that I'm from Nairobi. And in Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, believe you me, we've had a lot of bad media. And a lot of times we've had travel advisories when it's actually been okay. So one, maybe there's been a terrorist incident in a certain part of the country, and the whole country is suddenly put under travel ban. So having come from that knowledge and just seeing how we've just been going about our lives normally, I said, you know what? Would I be okay going to this state under travel level 4? Beautiful, beautiful experience in terms of the people I met. And then I also applied to another farm, which was in the southern state of Oaxaca. Such a beautiful, beautiful place. Hills and rivers, and I went to stay on a coffee farm over there. So I can see here, Robin, hello. I can see you on the live chat. Just want to say I'm listening from California at 7:30 a.m. Loving your story. Welcome, Robin. I'm so happy to be in touch with you again. This is one of the reasons I'm so excited about this show, a chance to reconnect with people that I haven't seen in ages. And, you know, being a backpacker, going all over the world, sometimes you don't know when you're going to see someone again, unless you're lucky and happen to be in the same place. So now, the only other preparation I did for my trip in Mexico was to ask people, what do I need to know about the language? Will people understand me? And people just clapped me on the back and said, Narissa, only one word you need to know in Spanish if you're going to Mexico. Can anyone guess what that is? Type into the chat box if you can guess what the one word is that people said I needed to know. Going to Mexico. I'll tell you, it is cerveza. Does anyone know what cerveza is? It means beer, because Mexicans love their beer. So that was the one word that I went to Mexico with, and it was the first Spanish word that I used, because it was the only one I knew. So basically, what was I looking for in this trip? I was curious. What is this backpacking thing? I was itching for adventure because I've grown up in a very traditional sort of community and background. And I was so excited to explore something new. You know, I was a bookworm when I was young, and there were so many fantasies and adventures. So to go on something, to go somewhere I'd never been, meet people I'd never met, it was just so exciting. So to explore and to learn, you know, why do people do this? So I'd actually like to read to you from my diary. So this is my travel diary from Mexico, written in 2013, December into January. And I've bookmarked a couple of pages that I'd like to read to you from. But first, I'll just summarize basically the sequence of events of the trip overall. In this particular episode, I'm just going to talk generally about my trip to Mexico, my first experience backpacking and what that was like. And then in future episodes, I can go into the details about the different places I went and what transpired there. So let's see. I started off, I was in California studying for my master's at the time, and I headed down to San Diego, and I crossed over the border to Tijuana by foot. And then from there, I took a domestic flight to DF, also known in English as Mexico City. And from there, I got to my hostel after 3 hours lugging my big, heavy, new red backpack around, determined not to use a cab. So I somehow communicated with people across English, Spanish in the metro, got lost in the metro. Beautiful people helped me out. managed to get onto a bus, got confused, people helped me out. On the metro, a guy on the metro drew a map for me, and I followed that map to the bus and got off a certain stop and got to my hostel through the streets. I don't even know how I did it. I was so tired by the time I got there, but I did it 3 hours later. So that was the entrance. And then so there I was in Mexico City for just a little bit. And soon after that, I headed to the state of Michoacan in the west, southwest of Mexico. And here I headed first to Patzcuaro, which is a very small town. And this is in the state under travel advisory. I stayed in this tiny hostel, and I spent all night chatting with the guy who built the hostel and owned the hostel. And I don't know how we chatted because we had a huge language barrier, but just hearing his story and learning about his culture as he learned about mine, it was beautiful. We had to use ladders to get to our rooms. I had to use 7 blankets because it was so cold. And then the next day, I was just in the market square eating some crazy fruits that I had never seen in my life before. And then I made friends with this Mexican couple that was enjoying their weekend in the market square. And they said, oh, hey, do you want to come with us because you said you're free today? And we're going to this place where there are some really beautiful old ruins because we have to buy something near there. We can take you to the ruins if you want. And I got really good vibes from them. And I know some people might say it was risky, but I went. And oh, it was amazing, amazing, beautiful couple. And I even have some pictures with them, which I can probably share on my blog. They're on my Facebook right now. We went to the ruins. We had fun. We talked. We chatted. And then they dropped me back. And then after that, it was evening. They called me a cab. And I took a cab to my first volunteering stint at El Bosque. That's a hippie community in the forest. So I arrived late at night. And this part was a little scary for me because I was in a cab. It was night. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know the cab driver. Honestly, I was really freaking out. And the cab stopped in the middle of the road and it was breaking down and I was freaking out. Like, why is this guy stopped in the middle of nowhere? And he could see I was scared. So he was trying to explain to me what was going on. Anyways, I reached safely. And I spent the next week or so volunteering in the forest where they basically practiced growing is agroforestry, so growing crops in the forest. And it was a really beautiful space, very hippie, open-minded people. I met people who taught me about herbal medicine, silk, hanging the silk from the tree, and I don't know, I couldn't do it. And my one highlight of that place was actually they had these toilets, eco toilets, and everyone used to fight over this one toilet, which it had 3 walls. The 4th wall was missing because it was overlooking the forest and it was facing where the sun rose. So every morning, everyone would run to be the person who got to watch the sunrise while pooping. Anyways, highlight of the day. Plans for one day when I have such a place. And the downside of this place that I stayed was that we only got to shower twice a week because we were trying to conserve water. I did not enjoy this. And when I left, I was smelly. And I was a bit ashamed of myself when I entered the hostel again in I think Mexico City. I ran straight for the shower. Anyway, so from there, I went down to Oaxaca, and there I was on the coffee farm and felt a beautiful 10 days on the coffee farm, picking. It was harvesting season, so I was picking the coffee, eating the berries half the time, getting bitten. I got 49 bites. Yes, exactly 49. I wrote it in my diary. Very itchy bites. I don't know what they were, but they lived in the coffee plants. Met beautiful people there. And then I went hiking in the Sierra Norte mountains, and with a guide who only spoke Spanish. So I got quite lonely during that period of my trip. And after that, yeah, I considered hitchhiking up to the north of Mexico, because I came across a truck driver who gave me a few hours of hitchhike from the end of my hiking to the main city. Then I considered hitchhiking with the same person all the way up the north, but I decided not to. Partially for safety reasons and partially because I had to get back in time for school and I was afraid the truck would break down. It was a really old truck. So that's a summary of my trip. I'd love to engage with you now if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask me. So feel free to type into the chat box any comments you have about the story I just told you, or if you have any questions you'd like to ask me about this trip or about backpacking in general. Meanwhile, I will be reading to you from my diary while I wait for your questions. Okay. El Bosque, day 5. I'm really happy to be doing this trip alone because I get to call the shots, all the shots. It's weird, though, that if something happened to me, nobody would realize for a while. Only in 3 or 4 days would my parents perhaps panic because I told them I would be off the grid. No one else would realize for weeks, I think. Hardly anyone has my Mexican phone number, and the phone is usually off anyway. And I'm hardly going online. Anyways, this solo exploration is super important for my personal growth. I've never been alone for so long before. So that's one entry in my diary. I'll move on to another diary entry. And like I said, if you have any questions that you'd love to ask me about my Mexico trip, about backpacking, my own reasons, my motivations, curiosity that you have about backpacking, just please go ahead and type it in the chat. I can see 2 comments here. Mohammed saying, hi, Narissa, I'm chatting from Tanzania. Karibu sana, Mohammed. I'm so happy to see you here. And Robin asks, wondering how much Spanish you learned and were you uncomfortable with sexual advances at any point? Okay, so those are 2 questions. How much Spanish I learned? My Spanish improved a lot. I actually wrote, I think a few days before I left Mexico, that I was starting to think in Spanish. And then I also added that this meant I wasn't thinking much because I didn't know many Spanish words, which was good because it gave my busy university student mind a break. However, I learned a lot more Spanish when I went backpacking for 4 months straight in South America a few months later, which is a story for another time. And Robin, your other question, were you uncomfortable with sexual advances at any point? Yes, this happened once. And it's actually happened a few times when backpacking. You have to be very, very, very careful, especially as a woman traveling alone. So this happened to me when I was in one of the places that I volunteered at for the farming. And at the beginning, when I entered the place, there were a lot of other volunteers there. And it was a great time, lots of exchange. But everyone left except me on the same day. So that night, it was just me and the owner of the place. And he started hitting on me, and I was not comfortable with this. He showed me a video on his computer, which was a little bit disturbing, of himself, and then attempted to try and flirt with me. I was scared, to say the least. So I retreated to another room, tried to calm myself for a few minutes. And then I headed straight to my cabin and I locked myself in for the rest of the night. I did not move. And the next morning I left. I was supposed to stay and volunteer for a few more days, but I wasn't comfortable. So this is also, I guess, very important advice for people who are traveling, and especially if you've got a volunteering agreement. The agreement stands as long as you are comfortable. If you're uncomfortable at any point, you are allowed to break that agreement and leave. Do never allow your safety to be compromised. So I was fine, but that was an incident that I had to get away from. Apart from that, just the usual, people hitting on you when you go out dancing and things like that. But that was the actual scary incident. So let's see the other comments. Teresia. Oh, that's Teresa. Hi. Teresa says, hey, Narissa, that's so exciting, but it made me so nervous at the same time. I was just getting anxious as you narrated, partly because I just watched Midsummer, the movie. Yeah, it's a very exciting thing to do. And actually, over time, I have gotten used to, and I've sort of learned along the way how to travel as a solo woman, how to be safe, things to do, things not to do. And this is part of the reason that I started the blog, Nomad Girl Tales, and now also this YouTube show, so that I can engage with people and others can realize that it's really okay and amazing to travel alone. And I can share, tips on how to keep safe. And it's actually never as scary as you think it is. I've never felt less safe traveling than I do at home, to be honest. And Basil asks, hi, Narissa. It is exciting to hear about all your travels. Were you ever afraid to travel by yourself? So funny, that's a similar topic we've been talking about. Was I ever afraid? Once. The only time I've ever been afraid while backpacking was when I went to Delhi in India, because my Indian friend, who's also lived in Nairobi, told me, Narissa, I know you think that you're so hardcore because you're from Nairobi that you can travel anywhere, but Delhi is worse than Nairobi. So I was so scared when I went to Delhi. And that's a story for another time as well. But I was fine. I only stayed 2 days and then I got out. And also because I'd heard all the stories, of rapes happening on buses. So Delhi is not always the safest place to travel. It's really not, especially as a woman. And Mohammed asks me, also, Narissa, I want to know how you manage to travel and how you fix your budget. So this one is a big question, which I think I must do a future episode on this. But in brief, how I managed was, at first, I saved up for a long while. I saved up while I had a stable job at an NGO. And then I really stretched out those savings. The only major cost I ever get is if I fly to a place. Otherwise, I'm on the road, I'm using public transport, I stay at the cheapest hostels, or I volunteer. I do value exchanges. So this means I don't spend money for weeks at a time, because I will exchange a service like farming, or now teaching yoga, sound healing, and all of those other skills I've acquired now, in exchange for accommodation and or food. So I do a lot of value exchange. And then recently I've started my own independent projects to keep me going, because those savings from the NGO also ran out. So now I started my travel blog, which is nomadgirltales.com, which I've not yet earned much money from, but it is going to happen. And then also this YouTube channel is growing. So this is also how viewers like you can also support me, because you can share it, you can subscribe, like, engage. And then also there's a donate button, which on the YouTube, if you go to the homepage of my channel, on the banner, there's a donate button. And then also on my YouTube, in the About page, there's a donate button. So these are some of the ways, but I'll definitely do another episode on this. I have some comments from Shayur. Shire says, what a fantastic story. It must have taken a great deal of courage and a sense of adventure. Thank you. And Shire says, backpacking gives an opportunity to learn and grow in significant ways. Absolutely. What were some of your key life learnings or ways you grew as a person? So actually, this is a perfect segue into one of the other readings I wanted to do from my diary, because I talk a little bit in my diary about things that I learned and experienced. So I'm going to read you one or two extracts that literally answer your question live from my private thoughts that I scribbled in my diary in 2013. So here we have 3rd of January, 2014. So it was just after the new year. When I go to a new place and see people who have been living there their whole lives in a culture completely different to any I have ever known, it reminds me how little I know and how little I will always know. So deep realizations happening all the time. And another realization I had, and this is a beautiful realization because often because of the mass media, the negative media, and a lot of complaints we see online, we don't realize how much love and beauty there is out there. So this particular entry, I said, people here are so nice. It always makes me swell with warm, fuzzy happiness inside when I see so much goodwill and positive energy and actions being spread and reciprocated many times forward to and from so many people. Not once did I have a negative encounter here so far. Every person I have talked to, asked for help, has patiently listened to my super slow Spanish attempts. Nobody said they were too busy or gave me anything less than their full attention and all the time or effort necessary to sort me out, going that extra mile. So that was another beautiful life learning that I continue to have every time I travel. I'm always so inspired by the love and beauty out there. Let's see what else. I think there was something else in here along the lines of that question. Yeah. Oh, this is another interesting thought that I had. I think I'd been learning a little bit about the ancient religions and seeing how people really respected nature. So I wrote a little paragraph in my diary. I was thinking that the move from pagan religions to current monotheistic ones might not have been totally progressive. Certainly, the elimination of human sacrifice was wonderful. However, didn't the older religions worship nature, resulting in more respect for and conservation of nature? So that was another interesting learning that I had. I have two more comments here. Teresa says, my friend did a trip solo and she says she grew so much just from doing that. I can only imagine the immense strength, courage, and character you have gained by doing this. This is true. This is true. And Mohammed says, also, Narissa, I want to know, how does our culture help you to survive in those countries? And in your opinion, can we keep our culture or can we live like people from abroad? So one of the things, I guess, that our culture in East Africa has really helped me with is the friendliness and the way that we engage with each other. Now, I tend to travel a lot in the so-called third world or developing world, and I often find people very friendly in these parts of the world as compared, unfortunately, to some of the developed countries that I've been to. So I felt that my culture has really helped me here in how open-minded I am and how open I am to meet people, and likewise how they are to receive me. This culture of welcoming guests and treating them like family. And in terms of your other question, Mohammed, I think it's really important to maintain the good aspects of our culture, but when we encounter another and we see something beautiful there, we can always incorporate aspects of that, give and take. Yeah. And Edgar is asking me, how did you find Mexican food? Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm laughing because I wrote in my diary about, first of all, how much weight I put on in Mexico because the food is so fattening. So much cheese. It's so tasty. So I did put on a good bit of flab on my belly during my Mexico trip. And I was also laughing because I also wrote in my diary about how I was eating so many frijoles. So people who know what that is, that's beans. And what do too many beans lead to? I literally wrote a comment in my diary, making note to self to walk behind the guide. Yeah, beans make you fart. And no, I'm not shy talking about bodily functions. You asked, I'm sorry. But my favorite dish was the tamales. Tamal is singular. And this is a breakfast dish of maize. And it's like mushed up maize in the leaf of the maize. And then they put these amazing flavors on it and sauces. And I can't remember any more about that meal because I haven't had it in years, but it was my favorite meal. And it's almost time for us to sign out. So I think I won't read the remaining ones this week. That'll be for next week. But next week, I do want to tell you some of the other bookmarks I had here were my favorite moments in Mexico. I talk about loneliness, and I talk about some of my, and actually, one of those favorite moments is one of my favorite moments in my entire life. And it's very simple. It had to do with a flower. And it's also represented in the logo of Nomad Girl Tales. That's how much of an impact it had on me. Coming back to Shayur's question about impact on my life. But that'll be for next week. Let me just finish with the last question and then sign out. Robin says, will you be able to resume travel in the post-COVID world? When? I don't know, man. I don't know. But I figured for now, what we can do is just meet and chat and exchange stories and inspire each other and share and bond. And that's the aim of this show. So in conclusion, if you haven't already subscribed, if you could just scroll down, and I don't know if I'm pointing to the right side of my screen because I don't know if it mirrors me, but it should be at the bottom right. I hope I'm pointing at the right. Under the video, there should be a little subscribe. So click on that red subscribe button. And next to the subscribe, there should be a little bell. So if you click on that, you'll get notified when I go live. And if you want to donate to support this project and things like the meditation courses I'm hosting and other social justice causes, you can look for the donate button. And apart from that, I look forward to seeing you next week. Mark your calendars and please invite your friends. Invite people who would love to talk about backpacking, who might be curious to learn, or who just want some time to chill out on a Friday evening in good company. So I wish all of you the most relaxing and peaceful weekend. Sending lots of love, and I'll see you next Friday at 3:30 p.m. GMT, convert to your time zone. Lots of love and so great to connect with those of you I've not seen in a while. Bye.